There's a wedding party today in this village in northern Chad. But in this region, where conditions are so harsh and life is so tough, there's not usually much to celebrate. Especially if your food supply is under threat. Like in 2012, when the locust population increased 250-fold in Chad, Mali and Niger.
The
locust swarms attack and damage our gardens and our pastures. Whatever they land on, they just devour it. The pasture land for our camels and even the trees. They completely destroy everything.
The local herder communities already live in precarious conditions, and they would face even greater hardship if locusts took away their food supply and their livelihood by destroying pasture land.
I make my living by selling camel milk. But when the locusts come, they eat all the pasture land. If my camels don't have anything to eat, they don't produce any milk for me to sell. And if I don't sell any milk, I can't afford to buy food for my family.
Constant surveillance, early warning and control operations are the only way to contain locust swarms and prevent them moving on to neighboring countries. The UN Food and Agriculture Organization, FAO, coordinates these operations and facilitates a regional response.
We monitor the situation with surveys on the ground. We get updated information and we share it with other countries in the region.
Specially trained teams check vast areas for locust infestations and gather information from the local communities. The data is recorded and transmitted via satellite using the eLocust-2 handheld data logger. The National Locust Center then relays the data to FAO, where it is analyzed with data from other countries. This is one of the oldest early warning systems in the world. Local teams spray infested areas with pesticide, using handheld equipment for smaller areas and pickup trucks for larger areas. For massive swarms, reinforcements can be called in from neighboring countries. Early funding and planning meant that Chad was ready to take action against the locusts as soon as swarms began forming. This time, the infestation was contained and did not spread to other countries.
The Philippines is a nation on the move. Every year, 1.5 million people leave the country to escape poverty and find jobs overseas. Today, there's an estimated 10 million Filipinos working abroad, who send home more than $20 billion a year. But very little of this remittance money is saved or invested. Most is spent on daily necessities and building more comfortable houses. Here in Mabini, south of Manila, 15% of the population works abroad. It's known as Little Italy due to its transformation by the migrants who now live there. They turned this former farming community into a prosperous-looking village in just one generation. Rolando Padoma works as a doorman in Rome. On a visit home, he says he's proud of the changes.
Now everything's fine here. We have well-built houses. It's not like before. Back then, when the typhoon struck, everybody would be gone.
But everything is not as it appears. Many of these villas are empty. With no one farming here anymore, there are few jobs available, and without money saved, the owners cannot afford to come home.
Before we used to be an agricultural town, but right now I would say that agriculture here is virtually dead. The dependence here became too dependent on foreign remittance. So much so that if there is a crisis in Europe, there is also a crisis here in the municipality of Mabini, Batangas.
This is a great concern for Attica, an organization that works to alleviate the social impact of migration.
It would be very difficult for the overseas Filipinos to be able to come home, return and reintegrate successfully. Because if the family does not have any income, they are just dependent on the remittance, the moment the migrant goes back home, they do not have any income and they do not have any training to be involved in any other enterprises.
Hoping to change the situation, Attica works with the UN's International Fund for Agricultural Development, back here in Rome, to provide financial education courses and investment opportunities for Filipinos. These migrant workers are learning about the benefits of saving and budgeting. They're encouraged to start their own businesses or use their money for long-term investments in agriculture. Flora Ventura and Charito Basa are Filipino workers who took part in the financial education program and are now training others. Both of them have invested in a poultry farm near Mabini. Run as a community cooperative, the farm is financed by over 1,000 overseas workers. The eggs produced are sold in local markets. Investors receive a minimum guaranteed 6% return on their money every year.
This is my very first certificate of investment to the egg layer farm, but I have 2 others at home.
When I received my first certificate, I felt I'm economically confident. There's something that gives us some income. It gives us more security of returning home because we won't be a burden to our children and we have something to start with.
Investments like this are not only creating personal wealth, they're creating jobs, which will one day help to make migration a choice rather than a necessity.
It's been 10 years since the war in Iraq started and 2 years since the conflict in Syria began. That's 2 anniversaries too many and too many going hungry. Here in northern Iraq, 50,000 Syrian refugees are crowded into this camp. It was supposedly full when there were 35,000. Here there are shops, bakeries, and schools. But no one would mistake Domi's camp for a holiday village, especially the people living here.
Here's the camp. There's our tent. When the wind came, it blew inside our tent, and the tent was about to blow over. And when the rain comes, it floods the tent.
Most of the refugees here are Kurds from northeastern Syria, with strong ties to other Kurds in Iraq and Turkey.
We're here in the Domi's camp in northern Iraq, where most people have fled from Qamishli and rural Qamishli in northern Syria. We're actually functioning inside northern Syria as well, so we are supporting the families that these people have left behind inside Syria, as well as the people that have sought refuge here in northern Iraq.
4 months ago, Miriam, her husband, and 6 children fled Qamishli to Iraq. Each month, the family received vouchers from the World Food Program worth $31 per person. Like many of the Syrians we met here, she recalls hosting Iraqi refugees during the war.
Now I feel the same way they must have felt when they fled and lost family members in the war. They came to us as refugees. Now I feel like they did.
It's a Spartan existence for Syrians living in the camp, while outside, Iraqis continue their struggle for stability. The voucher from WFP allows Miriam to buy food and helps the local economy. But best of all, it allows families to eat a meal together in peace, however fragile.